Hello. Welcome to New to Hill Country, Episode 1. I'm your host, Michael Hines. I just moved to Hill Country back in October of 2019 after 13 and a half years of living in South Korea. My wife and I relocated here to open up a gym called SBG Texas, and we did so with the help and guidance of diet guru Rob Wolf. We launched this podcast with the hopes of being able to meet new people and catalog our process of getting to know different people in the Hill Country area, because we felt that there are other people like us who have moved to Hill Country. We know it's great here, and we're trying to figure out how to plug ourselves in and be more a part of the community. Before I get into our first episode, I'd like to plug our sponsors just a little bit. Our first sponsor is SBG Texas. I'm the head coach of SBG Texas. SBG Texas is the first SBG launched in Texas. SBG stands for Straight Blast Gym. It's a gym network that began about 25 years ago in Portland, Oregon under Matt Thornton. At SBG Texas, we offer world-class training in martial arts, yoga, and meditation for both kids and adults. Our other sponsor is called Element. Element is an electrolyte mix. You get little packets, you drop it in about 16 ounces of water, stir it up, and you get much-needed electrolytes without a bunch of garbage, sugar, and other things that you don't need. Athletes who drink this in particular tend to notice that cramping goes way, way down. But for the non-athlete, you can also find that a lot of people who suffer from chronic fatigue and headaches don't realize that they may just be suffering from an electrolyte imbalance. If you want to get your hands on some Element, I'll send you over to the Facebook page or the Instagram page for SBG Texas. Go to Straight Blast Gym Texas at Facebook, and you should find one of our posts which will let you find a link for Element. If you follow that link, every purchase of Element that you make, 50% of that will go to SBG Texas to help us during the COVID shutdown. Our Instagram page is SBG Texas, and if you go through that, SPG_Texas, you can find a link within that as well. If you just want more information, those are great ways to find out more about SBG Texas. You can also visit us at www.sbgtexas.com. For fans of the podcast, you can get over to, we've got an Instagram page. It's just New to Hill Country, no spaces. That's our Instagram page. And our Facebook is New to Hill Country on Facebook. So today, on our first episode, we are talking to Maggie Eubank, co-owner of Pure Pastures. Pure Pastures practices regenerative farming. They've got cows, they've got pigs, and we get real deep into talking about regenerative farming in the Hill Country region. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to New to Hill Country. Today we're interviewing Maggie Eubank of Pure Pastures, and we are, fortunate to have her here. Maggie runs a really cool farm in Hill Country, and we're excited to hear all about it today. Maggie, are you from Hill Country originally?
I am kind of, depending on who you talk to. I'm from San Antonio, so okay. Sometimes people from San Antonio, we like to say that we're from the Hill Country, because it makes us sound cool. But I would say it's the south side of the Hill Country.
Okay. Now, I'm totally new to Hill Country, like in the most absolute sense. So is there generally a kind of like distinction between like people in San Antonio or Austin too and people outside of those areas? I'm really kind of clueless.
Well, I think Austin is considered Hill Country. It's just kind of the area north of San Antonio, kind of northwest of San Antonio, up to like Junction and all that way, just kind of the middle of Texas.
Okay.
And tell me about your upbringing within Hill Country. Like, what was it like growing up here?
It was wonderful. I'm from the northeast side of San Antonio, so New Braunfels was about 20 minutes from my parents' house,
Okay.
and we spent a lot of time in the Hill Country. I spent a lot more time than I should have while I was in high school in the Hill Country, when I should have been at school. But I grew up visiting. We would go to Fredericksburg. We would come to Wimberley. We were in New Braunfels and San Marcos all the time. So I have a lot of time spent in the Hill Country, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I love being back here. We live in the ranch is in Canyon Lake, so we're smack dab in the middle of the Hill Country, and it's just some of the most beautiful country on earth.
Nice, nice. Did you leave this area for a while? Or did you ever go anywhere outside of Texas and live for a little while? Or
I didn't live outside of Texas, but I did go to North Texas to go to college. I went to Tarleton State University, which is in a little tiny town called Stephenville. It's about an hour southwest of Fort Worth.
Okay.
And so I spent about 8 years up there.
Okay.
And then my now husband, Jeremiah, and I were going to get married actually about 5 miles from where we live now in Sattler. And an opportunity for him to get a job down here opened up, and I was really campaigning hard to come back home. So we moved back down to Stockdale, which isn't really the Hill Country, but we inched our way back into it.
Okay. I see. Winding back just a little bit, what did you study in school?
Agriculture. I actually have a degree in agriculture.
Oh, nice, nice.
My parents are super happy for me to be actually using a degree that they paid for.
Sure.
It's not really the same kind of agriculture that I studied, but a lot of the principles transfer over.
Okay. So when you were studying agriculture, it would have been, I'm not in any way, I am not an ag science major or anything like that. So I'm a little green about all that stuff, but I am from Iowa originally. And so it is an agricultural state, and you get a little bit of understanding of things, I suppose. Would it all be kind of, when you were studying in school, was it all kind of green revolution type perspective on farming, like really heavily like monocropping, and just you tell me. So
yeah, it was a very conventional farm atmosphere at my college. Most of the people, I was one of the only people in the program that didn't come from a farming background. I
see.
My family didn't farm. I was an FFA kid, which really drove me to want to have an ag degree. I grew up wanting to be a veterinarian. When I got to college, I realized that I do not have the discipline to be a veterinarian. But it was a very conventional ag program, which was good. I learned basic husbandry and some genetics and things like that. I went more the animal route. And my actual degree is in ag services and development. So it was more of like an extension and service arm of ag. But I took a lot of ag sales classes and ag communications classes and entomology classes. There's actually a lot more that crosses over into the more regenerative ag style that we practice today. But a lot of it was monocropping and confinement operations and stuff like that. So
and what, so you kind of came up with this more conventional perspective on this, and at some point you started becoming more aware and more interested in the regenerative farming. And I'm kind of curious, could you talk us through that process of was there a lot of can you remember the first time you started hearing about that? Did you immediately take interest in it, or were you resistant to it? Or just kind of talk us through that process a little bit.
So back when we were still living in Stephenville, we had actually moved. My husband and I bought 35 acres in this even smaller town called Dublin. And it was he grew up pretty rurally. His dad had cows, his grandfather had cows. They weren't really farmers, but they did have cattle and things like that. And so we just always had this idea that we wanted to be more self-sufficient. We always had a garden. We had chickens, you know, kind of like a homesteading type thing. We really wanted to live more like our grandparents lived.
I see.
And at the time, I was working for an animal health company in Dublin. And so I was all day in this kind of heavily animal drug driven industry, and then going home and just, you know, picking bugs off of my vegetables because I didn't want to use anything, and free ranging my chickens and all that stuff. So we just kind of did that, not knowing that it was slowly becoming a thing. I mean, this was back in like 2008.
I see.
And after we moved to Dublin, not long after that, I was laid off of my animal health job and started working for Texas Parks and Wildlife. So I went from heavy animal health, antibiotics, things like that, to wildlife conservation, all these things. And it kind of fell more in line with how we were farming at home. And then my husband brought in this book about high intensity grazing.
I see.
Like management intensive grazing. Sorry, not high intensity. A management intensive grazing book. And we read it and I was like, man, that just sounds cool.
Okay.
And
do you know the name of the book or the author? Do you remember?
I don't. We still have it, but I can get the name for you, but it just kind of snowballed from there. I mean, it was a slippery slope, really.
Can I pause you here? It seems like obviously your relationship with your husband is a big deal in all of this, and you guys work together and you're co-owners in all of this. So how did you guys meet? Like, that's something I feel like I'm missing that part of the puzzle here, and it's such a huge piece, right?
It is a huge piece. So I was still in school at Tarleton. When you get to the last semester of the degree program that I was in, it's an internship that you do. And some friends of ours, this doesn't really pertain to agriculture, but they had opened a barbecue restaurant, and that was my internship, was to be their manager for some reason. I don't know why.
Sure.
But anyway, Jeremiah, there was a big equipment rental company in town, and Jeremiah was the general manager of that store, and they knew him and they knew me. And for the grand opening, they had this big party, and he brought the generators. He donated them to the thing and everything like that. And so we met that night, and it was kind of just like we couldn't shake each other thing after that.
I see. You just
kind of
kept running into each other.
We just kind of ran into each other, and then we were already living together when we went on our first date. So it was just kind of a weird thing. But it was a very much right place, right time thing, and it's working so far. But
how long have you guys been married?
It'll be 10 years in September. And we've been together almost 15.
Okay. Well, and then for people that don't know Maggie, her sons are students at my gym, Gus and Hunter, and they're great kids. So yeah. What about did you, like you said, you read this book on the intensive farming practices? Did I get that right?
Yes, right? Intensive grazing. Intensive grazing.
Okay, sure. And you read that, you thought it was amazing, but then there had to have been a step there where you decided to go in and start doing this kind of thing. Like, what was the impetus for that? And
well, so we moved back. We got jobs down here in Stockdale, and we moved down here, and then we had 35 acres in Dublin, and we moved to 10 acres out here. But we kind of upped our chicken production because we were back down here with my family, so we were giving them eggs. We had a bunch of all my friends. I basically moved Jeremiah back down into my world, so all my friends from high school, we were hanging out with them. And then we just decided the 10 acres that we had was heavily treed. very heavily
Okay.
treed.
Okay.
And it was very brushy. And so we were thinking we wanted cows, but there wasn't really any grass for cows out there. And there wasn't a lot of room for a lot of cows. So we thought, well, we'll just get a couple of pigs. We love pork. Pork that is conventionally raised. We didn't really like how it was conventionally raised.
Sure.
So we got a couple of pigs and we thought, we'll raise them on pasture. We'll rotate them around. They'll get all this brush up, help us clean out the place. And then we were about a week into that, and we actually found one of the heritage breeds that we were really heavily looking into. We just happened to find a guy in New Braunfels that had some pigs that he needed to get rid of. So we found those, brought him back to the house, and we butchered one of them. One of them was bred and the other one wasn't. So we butchered her, and we were like, holy crap, this is the best pork we've ever had. Like, we have to, but sure, this must be a fluke, whatever. Well, we gave some to some of our friends, and they were like, holy shit, this is the best pork we've ever had. Are y'all going to do this some more? So then we got another sow, and then we got a boar. And then it really just snowballed from there. We both continued to work until we were about 2 years into it. And we were just doing whole and half pigs for people that we knew, or putting it on Facebook, custom cut. We weren't doing any retail or any farmers markets or anything like that. And then when we started doing farmers markets, it blew up from there.
I see.
We just really ramped up production.
Were you guys working other jobs during this time? This was kind of like a hobby of sorts?
Yes. We were both working full time. We moved actually down here to work in the oil field. When the Eagleford Shale first popped off, my husband came down here to work, and then I got a job too. And so we were both working through the beginning of this. I didn't quit. I went full-time farmer in 2016.
Okay.
I think. And then he just now, when we moved out here to this ranch, that was in October, and he quit to do that. So he was working full-time job, coming home, getting out of the truck, and then farming full-time too.
So I got some of this story previously with Sean Peters. He and I went night hunting together, and he kind of told me some elements of that, but he was pretty sparse on details and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I just kind of, he's like, oh, I used to work with Maggie and her husband in oil fields. And I was like, you did? Oh, okay. Huh. Interesting. So
there's surprisingly a lot of husband-wife combos, brother combos, sister combos. My brother-in-law worked there also. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it's a weird thing in moving to Texas. I'm so green to everything, and I didn't realize how many people worked in oil and stuff. Like I don't know why, it just never really occurred to me. Like I just didn't expect that to be something I would hear with a certain amount of frequency. So that's been kind of interesting to me.
And we were super lucky to get in, because neither one of us had ever worked in the oil field ever. Stephenville, that we had a lot of friends in Stephenville that were working in the Barnett Shale. At that point, that was the big boom at that point. But the Barnett was kind of leveling off, and they were all coming down here because this new Eagleford Shale was about to blow up. And so Jeremiah didn't like his job. I wanted to move back down here. And so we just knew somebody that was coming down here, and it was early enough in it that he was fortunate to get on. And then I didn't plan on working when we got down here, but then he sure enough found a job for me also.
I see.
Unfortunately, or fortunately. So, but yeah, it's a big industry. I loved being in it. It was great for our family, but both of us getting to do what we really are passionate about is great.
So at some point in there, I'm guessing it was something around 2016, if I understood that correctly. You made the switch to being full-time farmer, and talk me through that process. You must have been some trepidation before doing that, right? Like some concerns. You were a little like, you knew you wanted to do this thing. A lot of people know they want to do a thing, but then going from wanting to doing can often be a pretty big step. So that's what I
Right.
kind of want to hear about is how did you go from the like, I want to do this to like, now I am actually doing this. Like,
Well, I had actually, we worked for the same company, but we worked in different departments.
mhm,
And I had become pretty unhappy in
I see.
my department.
Mhm.
I had gotten a new boss. We didn't really see eye to eye. It was just kind of a weird time for that department. So we had sort of started laying out a plan for me to quit 6 months down the road or something like that. We were trying to work out, how we were going to do it. My husband and my brother-in-law had a shredding business also. They were shredding pastures for people.
Okay.
And so I was going to kind of do that and run the farm and all this stuff. Well, about a week later, I got fired.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
So it was like, holy shit, like, what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
But we just kind of hit the road running. There was a bunch of stuff that we hadn't been able to do because I was working. I couldn't do farmers markets. I couldn't do all these other sales outlets. And now I had the time. So it was kind of a sink or swim moment. Like, all right, you've been hounding me to do this. You say you can do this. It's time to do it.
I see. Huh.
So it was not perfect how we transitioned into it, but it was definitely a blessing in disguise.
I see. I understand.
So.
Yeah, it's it can be that scary moment of being let go at a job and having especially if you don't expect it, like if there's no build up to it and you thought like, and you made plans like that things were just going to go forward and then all of a sudden it doesn't,
right.
like it's a pretty big shift, huh?
Yeah, it was, there was a couple of freak out days for sure.
I'm sure.
And then after that, it was just like, well, this is how it's going to be. Jeremiah had his job was great. He was definitely like, I wasn't really bringing home much bread and bread bringing, but, so it wasn't like we weren't going to be able to pay our bills and everything like that. It was just like, dang, it just happened. No. So
I understand.
But we didn't look back after that.
And then which area were you in at that point? You were not around exactly in this area where we're at right now, New Braunfels. You were kind of somewhere else, right? Like,
yes.
Is that correct?
So we were in Stockdale, which is a little bitty tiny town that is south of Seguin. So Seguin is south of New Braunfels and Stockdale is south of Seguin. Okay. We were actually the same distance basically from everything that we do. We're the same distance from all of our farmers markets, the same distance from everything. We're just coming from the other side now, the other direction.
Tell me about the move to Canyon Lake then. Like what precipitated that?
So we had tried to buy a couple of other places around Stockdale because 10 acres, very quickly it became apparent that 10 acres was not enough. Sure. And with pigs, especially, you can really run a place down. And we didn't want to get to the point where it was getting to where if we were going to keep up with demand, we were going to really degrade our place. And we didn't want to do that.
I see.
But we also didn't want to give up on the farm either. So we had tried to buy a couple of places around Stockdale, which land, they're not making any more of it. So it's fetching a pretty high price. Sure. And Stockdale was in the middle of the Eagle Fruit Shale. So even down there, land was crazy expensive. So our realtor is a very good friend of ours. So we basically had her on retainer and she was just sending us stuff constantly. So we found this one piece of land. It was 40 acres and we were going to buy it. But we were going to buy it with a USDA loan, which is a process. Any government loan is a process. I'll just say that. Okay. So it wound up falling through because of the time frame that it was taking to close the loan. So we were but they continued to let us lease it. They let us lease it when we put the contract in, so we could move what cattle we had over there, and we brought in sheep because it was good pasture over there. So we had the sheep and the cattle over there. The pigs were still at our place, and we moved our laying flock over there too.
Okay.
And then there was another place down the road that we tried to buy, and it fell through. And it was just like, we got to a point where it was like, I guess this is it. We've topped out. We're doing good. We're rolling along. We have more stock, this is just where we're going to be. This is what it is for our farm. And then I saw on Facebook, a friend of ours has a consulting business. He also does grass-fed beef. But he has a ranch consulting business on the side also. And he had a client that was looking for ranch managers to come run his ranch in Canyon Lake. He was very into the regenerative agriculture movement, which was what we were doing. But he didn't know anything about it. He just knew that sequestering carbon was important to him, and he wanted someone to come regeneratively farm his ranch. So that involved my husband, Jeremiah, basically quitting his job because he was already driving 45 minutes to an hour from our house. So it would have been 2 hours from Canyon Lake. So it was a pretty big decision, but we put our name in the hat. And after a few interviews, we got the job. So we pulled the kids out of school, quit jobs, sold the house, uprooted, and here we are.
Oh, what was wow, there must have been some very strong feelings during that time.
There were some strong feelings. You talked about the kids, Hunter and Gus. Hunter was in 3rd grade. He had been in school for since kindergarten in Stockdale, and Stockdale's such a small town. He had so many, they're all friends.
Right.
We knew everybody.
Right.
Gus had a bunch of friends at daycare. It was hard for them to leave their friends. And we were tied to Stockdale too. We had lived there for 8 years, or nearly 9 years. And we had a bunch of good friends there. We were much closer to my parents than we are now, because they live in Seguin. But it was a big decision. That was the first nice house we had bought together. We brought our babies home to it.
Sure.
There was a lot of feelings for sure, but at the same time, it was we talked about it, and this gave us the opportunity to do what we're passionate about. We would never be able to afford on our own to raise our children in a place as picturesque as this and teach them how to do this as well.
Beautiful.
And the owner of the ranch and his family are just so amazing, and we just immediately connected with them, and it just felt right. So we took the leap.
Awesome.
And everyone at Jeremiah was the least likely person to quit his job. So when I first sent we have a newsletter that people can sign up for through our farm. And when I first sent the newsletter about us moving, people were worried about how long his commute was going to be, because they did not even fathom that he would be quitting his job to do this.
And why would they not fathom that? Because he loved what he was doing, or just is he he's the type of person that just doesn't stop when he starts doing something? I've not met Jeremiah, so
he didn't hate his job. I mean, he liked his job. He was a foreman. So it was a good job. He liked what he did. He liked who he worked with. It just wasn't what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. It wasn't what he was passionate about.
Sure.
But he's not a not worker. I've never met someone with a work ethic like that. So he was just dependable. He was going to do his job. He never called in sick. He put work for, he's a very dedicated employee, and he was good at what he did. And he had been there. He was the 5th operator that they hired when the Eagleford was going on. So he had been there longer than most of the people that worked there. Wow. So they were just all a little surprised. He's not a shoot from the hip kind of guy. You know,
I see.
it's usually like a well thought out thing. I am the shoot from the hip. I'm that part of the equation.
Interesting. Huh.
So
And I sort of, I kind of, I guess I feel like I can kind of understand where that's coming from. When I left the graduate school to come here to Texas and stuff, most of my coworkers were kind of blindsided by it. A few people were like, "Oh, I thought we were gonna like retire together and stuff like that." Like they didn't expect me to leave because I had a lot of people who had done my job had left the job really quickly, often because they were let go. But I had stayed there for 10 and a half years. And so I'd become sort of an institution at the institution, you know, like I was just, I was in all the photos. I was in all the, you know, just always there basically. And I think I was just good about making sure I got everything done. But sounds similar kind of shock type thing.
Yeah. I mean, people were asking us like, is the farm in trouble? Like, do you need a bet? Like, it just, it wasn't in the realm of possibility that this was just a chance. We could not, this was a once in a lifetime thing. There was, I mean, if we were packing up the kids and moving and it happened quick, we signed on, I think in August, and we were here in October. So it was like, are y'all running from something? No.
Sure. No,
running to something. We're running to something.
Sure. What about, I'd like to return to, like, you talked about sequestering carbon. And I feel like, I think there's a lot of people who do know about this, but there's probably an equal proportion of people that have no idea what you're talking about. They've heard more, they're more likely to have heard that, like, cattle creates carbon. I think that's probably the more common narrative that you would hear if we were to just interview people on the street. Maybe not so much in Texas, but like I feel like almost anywhere else in the world, people would be like, "Oh, but you know, WHO and these other the UN has said, you know, cow farts are destroying the ozone layer and all this kind of stuff." So, tell me, like, inform people. What's the other side of this that you would give up? Just to make it clear, like you gave up your jobs, like, to focus on this full time, you know, like, and I think it's important for people to understand this side of the narrative. So
cow farts get a bad rap for sure. And I mean,
yes,
they're not great to experience, but they're not ruining the earth like everyone says that they are. So the part of the reason that we took this job also is because Canyon Lake has a very it's just a place in its own. It's very rocky. It has been overgrazed since the Europeans came here, basically, to the hill country. It is a beautiful landscape, but it's also in dire need of regeneration. So the idea is that we can build topsoil and we can bring back native grasses, native forbs, and really regenerate these natural systems through animal impact. So those farts that everybody's worried about, when cattle graze an area, they're pooping, they're peeing, they're spreading fertilizer, and then they're stomping it into the ground. And then when they're grazing these plants, if we manage how they graze them, all of that stimulates this root structure in the plants. And so they're feeding the microbiology in the soil with their manure and their urine, and then they're stimulating the root growth by grazing these plants. And through all of that, and this is a very simplified version of it, through all of that, they're rebuilding these ecosystems, and these plants are taking carbon out of the atmosphere that is harmful and sequestering it back down into the ground and helping to grow more plants that are just going to keep doing the same thing. So it's the literal circle of life happening. Sure. And the problem with overgrazing is that they can scalp a landscape. Pigs especially, man. Pigs will turn something into a moonscape if they're allowed to. But if we manage them and rotate them often, they take just enough to feed themselves and leave enough to fertilize and really start the regrowth process.
And this is essentially what people were doing for like thousands and thousands of years, correct? Like,
right.
Yeah.
It mimics the bison herds crossing the plains. It's just eating when it's good and then moving to something that's better and leaving the rest to regenerate. We just have to show them how to do it now because they haven't been.
And when they also don't live in an untamed world, basically,
right? They're not running from predators. Yeah. So
like 1,000 years ago, pigs weren't running into fences,
exactly,
or roads or something like that. So they need a little assistance right now. But that's interesting, huh?
Yeah. And we do it through multi-species. So we have pigs, cows, sheep, chickens, and ducks in our grazing program. And actually our sheep and our cattle graze together in one. It's a flock and a herd together.
Okay. Huh.
But that gives more even coverage, more impact per paddock that they're in. So the sheep eat different things than the cattle do. Their manure is different than the cattle, and their hoof impact, their actual physical impact is different. So it's basically covering more area in less time.
Cool.
And they can break. There are parasites in sheep, parasites in feces that cattle are immune to, and cattle parasites in feces that sheep are immune to. So it basically breaks the parasite cycle as well. So.
Oh wow, interesting. Huh. That's really fascinating. Huh. So now tell me a little bit more about just like Pure Pastures. It used to be like Easy E Farms, and it changed names to Pure Pastures. Like, tell me a little bit about that.
So when we started just our farm in Stockdale and that way, it was Easy E Farms. Our last name is Eubank. And we had a brand because that's the first thing anybody does in Texas is gets the brand together.
Sure.
And it looked like two E's it was two rocking E's. And I said, it looks like they're taking it easy. So I said, we're going to be Easy E Farms. Obviously, because Easy E, the rapper, my husband had no idea who he was, though. So that was also funny. So we did that for a while. And then we came out here. And it was like, this isn't just about us anymore. We have other families involved. We have new place. So we just totally rebranded, and we thought that Pure Pastures was the best way to put out there what we were doing, because our pastures really are pure. They're not, we're not spraying anything. We're basically letting animals do what animals do and just sitting back and make sure they do it where they need to be doing it.
Sure.
So it's it was a little bit of a transition. I mean, we had built a little bit of a name up as Easy E Farms, and people still call me that all the time. But it was a good decision. We really like where we're going with it now.
Cool. When you were Easy E Farms, did Dr. Dre ever reach out with some anger or frustration? No, I'm just kidding.
No, but I did tell my husband that if we would know that we had made it if we got a cease and desist from Easy E's estate. Like that would be when we knew that we had made it.
He passed away some years back,
a long
right?
time ago.
Yeah, a while ago.
Yeah.
He was an interesting character. But
yes, he
had met President Bush or something like that. I mean, Bush Senior or something, didn't he? He had an interesting kind of arc outside of his rap career and stuff, where he was pretty involved as a businessman or something. So, and
when Straight Outta Compton came out, we had a bunch of friends that sent us Straight Outta Stockdale artwork and wanted us to get T-shirts made, but I figured that'd be pushing it a little too far.
Yeah, I might be pushing it there. Yeah, sure. No, that's funny though. I mean, it was the first thing I thought, when I saw the name of your farm before the Easy E. I was like, what's the connection to this? Sort of it just kind of came into my mind right away. But tell me a little bit about Pure Pastures, like what can I do to basically engage your services?
So we're on Facebook and Instagram. Both of them are at Pure Pastures TX.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have our website that right now we're doing primarily website sales.
Mm-hmm.
And it's purepasturestx.com.
Okay.
We have all of our stock that we have on there. And then I'm doing deliveries. We have a newsletter that you can sign up for at the website, and that's where we roll out things. We have a new promotion coming up where we're going to be starting a VIP program.
Cool.
Anytime that we get new cuts back from the butcher, people on the newsletter get first dibs of everything, and they're the first ones to know about what's going on at the farm. And it's not spammy because I'm not great at sending it out yet.
Sure.
But it's the best way to stay up with us besides Facebook and Instagram. I try to stay on those pretty regularly just so people know what's going on. But we really want people to feel like they're a part of this movement because it's so important to everyone, whether people believe in climate change or not. That's not really important to me. We just we're doing something about it regardless whether they believe or not, and we want more people to be involved and invested in it because there are more of us out here doing it. There's so many farms that are out here doing it now, but we always need more people to be involved. So
sure
I really like the newsletter. We have a lot of good response from our newsletter. Some very loyal followers. So
I don't know if I'm on your newsletter or not. I should be, shouldn't I? Like,
you
sign
should
me up
be.
if I'm not. Like, or maybe I'll have to check through my email. Maybe it was not collecting somehow. I don't know.
I think it can go to your spam folder if you're not.
There's so much email that I get that I don't want to get, and now you're telling me about email that I would have wanted to get. So I'm a little frustrated. I'm like, I get so much email that I don't want to get. Like, but okay, I'll look through.
I'll make sure you're on there. Yeah. I'm gonna send one out. I'm gonna send one out this week sometime. So I'll make sure you're on there.
Okay. Anything else you want to say about Pure Pastures? Or I will actually just say a little something myself. Like I've made at least 2 orders from you, and I've loved it every single time. Recently, just right now, what's on my mind is we just got a bunch of ground beef from you, and it was level up. You know, like had some ground beef from like a local store and stuff like that. It was okay. I mean, but it was just a significant level up. I don't know what it is, but like even just when I was cooking up the ground beef to make tacos, it's usually what I do with the ground beef is I make tacos. And that's largely from living in Korea and just not having access to good tacos. I'm all about making tacos all the time now. And just when I was cooking up beef just from the store or whatever, whenever I would get done, there was all this like liquid. It was all liquidy when I was done. Maybe you know what's going on, but when I cook up your stuff, it's not like that. I don't have all this like weird excess liquid to drain off or something. And it's delicious. It's just like, it's just ready to go. What's up with that? I'm kind of, maybe you know, maybe you don't. I don't know. But
I call it, when I talk about it with people face to face, I call it sticky fat. The fat in it is a different kind of fat because our pigs, we give them a supplemental feed, but it doesn't have corn or soy in it. So their fat is different compared to the fat off of a pig that you would buy at the store. And it doesn't just melt. Like fat that's left in the pan, there's something about it that it hangs on to seasonings better. And it stays with the meat better. So you don't have to drain it off because it's so, I don't know. I don't know the actual chemical properties that make it better, but I call it sticky fat because it sticks to the meat. So
we'll get Rob Wolf to talk about that.
Yeah, we need Rob. We need Rob to break down the structure of the fat. But we make chorizo, which chorizo is a big thing, especially in South Texas. But any chorizo that you buy at the store, you cook it, and there's like, if you buy a pound of chorizo, there's like a quarter of a pound of meat and then a bunch of grease.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
ours isn't like that. It's very meaty because the grease doesn't run out of it. It's just a sticky fat.
See, and here I thought for a moment before I asked this question, I was a little bit worried that you'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Like, or
Oh
something,
no,
like, you know,
no!
like,
People ask
like,
me all the time
yeah.
because our ground pork specifically looks very fatty because it
I
is.
see.
But and people are kind of leery of it, and I'm like, just try it out. Make something, make like a egg roll bowl or something with it. Just where it's really just ground pork, and it's not greasy. It's not greasy at all, which for the kind of pigs that we raise, they're fattier pigs. But it's really good fat.
That's awesome. It definitely tastes better, and it's my wife just hates like the greasy pans that I leave behind and stuff after cooking.
Yeah.
And the fact that it doesn't do that, I always used to try to cook with the grease and stuff, but I don't have to do that after I cook with your stuff. It's just ready to go, and I love that. It kind of was just something that really stood out to me on this last order. It was like, this is really different, and obviously it tastes amazing. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
we're trying to show people what real animal tastes like.
Right. So yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, when I was in college, I became a vegetarian, and but it was for a little bit different reasons than most people. I did it because my meditation teacher just told me to do it, sort of, kind of just like your meditations will be better. So I did it. And then, but I was friends with a ton of like vegans and vegetarians. And so I was always kind of hearing about all the feedlot issues and things like that with raising animals. And just, it's interesting to me looking back on that. I'm not trying to criticize people who decide to take that route or whatever, but just, there's a difference between, like, people would pose that as the problem. The problem is feedlots, and then they would pose it as though the only solution is be a vegetarian, be a vegan.
Right.
But that isn't the only solution. And I love that there is this other solution. And I think a lot of people, should pay attention to the feed. I agree wholeheartedly with the vegans and the vegetarians that the feedlots are a problem, but I don't agree that there's one solution to that.
For sure. It's not all or nothing. It's not, and you can do it. And we always say that we're just trying to regenerate this land, and the best meat you've ever tasted is just a side effect.
Yeah.
It's just a happy bonus.
Bonus, I'll take it.
When people ask Hunter and Gus what kind of farmers they are, they tell them that they're grass farmers, because that's what we really are. We're trying to grow grass.
Huh. Oh, that's cute.
Just using animals to do it.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Maggie. This has been really informative and really cool. Let's just repeat the website again one more time for people listening, so they don't have to dig all the way through it if they were trying to go back and find. So
sure. The website is purepasturestx.com. You can sign up for our newsletter there. There is a spot where you can plug in your info and ask us a question if you need to, or you can just email us directly at holler@purepasturestx.com. And yep, all those come to me. So you'll be getting answers from me.
Awesome, Maggie. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you, Mike.